Moves it across the line. Celebrini in, shoots, scores! Macklin, Celebrini strikes back, and the game is tied at 1.
Puts it in front. Eiserman, wrist shot, score! 4 on the board for Cole Eiserman.
Back to Dickinson, big shot, he scores! A sizzler from Sam Dickinson, and it is 4-2 Knights.
Hello guys, and welcome to the mid-season Top 32 2024 NHL Draft Rankings. At the midpoint of the draft season, who do I see as the best prospects in this draft, and which guys could your team end up drafting in the first round? Well, make sure you watch till the end as we go through the complete Top 32 with scouting reports, analysis, and more. And make sure you guys hit that subscribe button for more draft content in the future as we lead up to the draft this summer. Now, before we get into the honorable mentions and the full Top 32, let's first talk about today's sponsor in Sleeper Fantasy. Folks, if you think you know hockey, then Sleeper Fantasy is the perfect way to use that hockey knowledge to win real money. All you gotta do is go to the description, click on the link, download the Sleeper Fantasy app, and use promo code GRAB, and you can get up to a $500 match on your first deposit. And all you gotta do is pick more or less on different players around the league. I got 3 different picks for tonight's action. More than 2.5 shots on goal with Bo Horvat. He's been solid as of late versus the Leafs. I got Georgiev allowing less than 2.5 goals versus the Rangers. He's been brilliant in a couple games he's played versus them. And I got Jonathan Drouin at higher than 0.5 points versus New York. Just like a player like Horvat, he's been really hot as of late, and I think he'll continue that tonight. Putting down $10 to win 54 later tonight. We've had a couple of really solid wins in this channel, and hopefully this will keep it going. So again, go to the description, click on the link, and use promo code GRAB to get started with Sleeper Fantasy today. Now, regarding this 2024 draft, to me, it's kind of an interesting one. I wouldn't say it's a particularly strong one, but I also wouldn't say it's a weak one either. It's about in the middle. But I think there's some pretty good depth here still, especially in the second half of the first round, that'll make a lot of teams happy. Now, before we get to the top 32, I have 5 honorable mentions, guys that just ended up missing my list, and 5 guys I wanted to mention still. Dominic Badinka, Alphonse Frey on the defensive side of things, and on the forward side, Ryder Ritchie, Teddy Stiga, and Dean Letourneau are the 3 guys that just missed. But let's get started with today's mid-season prospect rankings, and let's start out at number 32 with the 32nd best prospect in this year's draft. Right now, I'm going to go with defenseman out of the WHL, Charlie Elick. Now, Elick is your pretty standard defensive defenseman, but out of this class, a more defensive D, whether it be a AJ Emery or Matvei Shervin, I think Elick is the most likely to play NHL minutes, and big ones at that. His size is obviously a main point, but I think his skating pedigree and the way he's able to command himself on the ice is really important. He's a fantastic skater, fluid on his feet, and I think that'll be one of the biggest things that propels him onto the NHL in the next level. Even though there is some concerns over his puck handling and the management with the puck when he does have it, I think this is a player that can be a really solid shutdown D, a 4th or 5th guy in the NHL, and kind of like a Brandon Carlo once he settles in. Next up at number 31, we're going to go to another Canadian Hockey League player here in Sam O'Reilly of the London Knights, who at 6'1", 176 pounds, has been really fun to watch, especially over the past couple of months with London. Whenever I'm watching Sam Dickinson, I'm always like, what is this one forward that's just unreal? Getting the pucks back, always in the corners, behind the net, turning the play over, getting it back to his side. And it's always Sam O'Reilly. Fluid skater, but great determination and a really good offensive floor. This is a guy that I mean could turn into a solid, pesky third-line player in the future and really provide a lot of value as a forechecker on a middle 6. Next up at number 30, we're going to go on to the NTDP with Camille Berard, who has been one of the more underrated players in this class for me. And it's just a centerman that does a lot of things well. He's not going to be excelling in any one category, but as anticipation of the play, the maturity that he shows on all 3 zones, this is a player that I think is really underrated and is going to be a really solid pro player. Kind of like Sam O'Reilly, doesn't have the biggest ceiling in the world, but is a guy that I like more and more every time I watch him. Has been a leader in the NCDP this year, and just a solid, consistent guy. We're going to be getting a consistent and balanced game through and through. Next up, going on to number 29, and we're going to go on to one of my favorites here offensively in Miguel Marquez, who has been awesome this year of Lethbridge, especially over the last month or so, really getting hot. But you can see the skill level, the talent that he has is just through the roof. Getting some consistency will be the biggest thing, because I think showing that skill level every shift has been a little bit of a problem, but when he shows it, he's awesome. And in terms of pure talent, this is a top 20 player. Next up on to number 28, and going on to clearly one of my favorite overall players in this draft, and that is Jet Luchenko, who comes in here at a pretty high spot, but considering his leading Guelph in scoring this year, as a player that doesn't even turn 18 until August, it's pretty impressive. With Luchenko, even though he might not be the tallest, he plays like he's bigger and is able to get away with it just because of the smarts, the physical traits he has. He's strong on his skates, and in transition, he's a smart playmaker, is able to work off his teammates incredibly well, and I think that IQ will take him a long way and to a solid middle six spot in the NHL. Now we keep going through OHL guys who continue to impress me and continue to go up my board. At number 27, I got Cole Baudouin, who has been unreal for Barrie this year. On a really barren offensive team, he leads the team in goals and is second in points. And to me, as a 6'2", 201 center, this is a guy that's fast, he's physical, he's engaged on offense, and he's a player that can really work off of bigger opponents, can really do well in physical pressure under tight spacing. And I mean, considering that and the way he's able to work off his teammates well, get into those tight spaces, he's going to be a guy that translates his offensive game very well onto the NHL level. Now we're going to number 26, and next up I have Carter Yakimchuk from the Calgary Hitmen. Think Cale Makar's deking ability and pretty much nothing else. Though I do like some of the adaptability he has defensively, I think there is more potential to have him be a more defensive player. The shot and the deking is really the biggest thing when it comes to Yakimchuk and the offensive confidence, and we'll see how far that takes him in the NHL level. At number 25, let's go on to another guy who's on a pretty big floor in Emil Heming out of Finland, who at 6'2", 194 pounds, has great physical traits. And you can see this here in the Liga, 7 goals, 3 assists, 10 points in 32 games. This is a guy that I think is very mature, very pro-ready, keeps the game simple, and the way he's able to bounce off opponents, get some space, work off the rush, he can bring some pretty solid offense as well. I wouldn't really bet on him being a 60-plus point player, but I could really see him being an effective and good forechecking middle sixer you could just stash and not really worry about his game. Next up, let's move on to number 24, and coming out of the USHL, it's the Mustard Man in John Mustard, and no, that is not a fake name, it is actually real. And I think Mustard could actually turn out to be very, very good. As one of the youngest players in this draft class, Mustard has been really interesting in Waterloo in the USHL this year. 38 points in 36 games. After playing in 16U AAA hockey last season, this is a guy that's adapting pretty well and offensively has a toolbox that you are going to salivate over. Amazing speed, and his awareness offensively is just unreal. The vision he has and the way he's able to get in front of the net with his passing, with his ability, is going to be really interesting to project. And there is some times where there is some boneheaded turnovers, but I think if you give him more time, some patience to cook in the NCAA, this could be one heck of a player on your hands. Next up at number 23 is Igor Chernyshov, who has been a pretty highly rated Russian forward from this draft for a while now. But at 6'2", 192 pounds, you can see he got a pretty good stint in the KHL this season, now back in the MHL and dominating as you'd expect. With Chernyshov, he brings a pretty nice blend of soft skill, good passing ability, and the creativity with the passing, working off his teammates is very good too. But the physical play as well, he's already very mature, loves to make big hits, evade pressure, can really battle one-on-one and get pucks back. This is a player, though, that has a little bit of a lack of pure foot speed and consistency with his skating, and that might be what kind of holds me back from putting him inside the top 50. Next up at number 22, let's move on to Beckett Seneca, who is really rising for me as well as a really competitive, really skillful player that brings a good compete to the game, good IQ, and just a lot of good traits that you want to have in a future young player. I would say there's a little bit of awkwardness considering his skating, but this is a player that's really risen in his height the past year or so, growing like 5 inches or something, so it's kind of understandable. Kind of reminds me a little bit of what Matthew Boldy was able to bring in his draft year, just a balanced skill set, especially in the offensive zone, that I think will translate very well. Next up, going on to the last player outside the top 20, I got Michael Hage out of the Chicago Steel, a player that I really like. The determination, the work ethic offensively is there with the great skill that we've seen out of him for the past couple of years. This is a guy that can make a play, make it quick, and make it smart. And this is a player that, especially with his shot and the blend that he has in the dual threat game, can be a really interesting pace pusher in the future and an underrated defensive guy too. Next up at number 20, now let's move on to Luke Misa of the Steelheads, who really the pace and the possession is the name of the game here. The speed at which he plays the game, the way he's able to deke off defenders and really work the puck offensively. This is a guy that will be a transitional beast if he's given the free flow to do it all. Kind of like William Eklund, maybe a lighter version of that in his draft year. There are some times where you want more consistency and want maybe better decisions in the defensive zone, but still, this is a guy that could really do a lot at the NHL level. And I think especially as a top sixer, maybe more as a winger, we could see Misa really project well there. But I think a lot still has to go right for that to happen. Next up at number 19, we're going to go to a player that is not nearly as much of a project and will probably become a finished project in the NHL, and that is Sasha Boychuk, who at 17 years old has been spectacular in the USHL this year. And to me, the smarts and the way he's able to use his skill set, this guy that is patient but is collected with his puck possession, and I think is a guy that really uses his smarts in the best ways possible. Is going to be an analytical darling at the next level in the NHL level. And even though I think there's maybe a lack of pure foot speed and maybe a lack of control defensively, with the foot speed, I think he's smart enough and quick with his decisions enough to be able to get by at the NHL level and still look pretty good doing it. Now on to number 18, and a guy that will probably be a lot higher once I watch more of him throughout the rest of this season, and that is Andrew Basha of the Medicine Hat Tigers. Obviously, Kane Lindstrom is going to get a lot of attention, but Basha has been incredible as well. As a 6 foot, 185-pound forward, playmaking is incredible, but the pace and the skill set, I mean, he is just one of the most fun players to watch in this entire draft class, honestly. He is just undeterred. He's just undeterred, and he's determined on every single shift to get the job done. And even though I think there could be some more muscle added on, I think physically he could use his body in a lot of better ways consistently, this is still a guy that I think will turn that page and be able to become likely a second line guy if those skill sets are able to translate well. Now going on to number 17, and here's where Adam Jiricek lies, who unfortunately had a massive injury at the World Juniors, which turned his season into nothing. He is out indefinitely and won't play another game this year in Czechia, which is just absolutely unfortunate because there were points where he did look good this season at the pro level. Maturity-wise, physically, this is a guy that can make some really good defensive plays, and the mobility he has with his skating and the consistency at that too is a really interesting couple of traits here. I think you could build a top 4D with the mobility that he has. I just kind of question how much offensive upside he has, how much skill he has offensively, but I think those raw traits could really turn into something, though this will definitely be a project. Now we move on to number 16, right outside of the top 15 here, but Nikita Artamonov comes in this spot, and honestly, it's extremely close between here and like number 12. All these guys are in pretty much the same tier for me. With Artamonov, he has been brilliant in the KHL this season with Torpedo, 19 points in 43 games, and just getting more and more responsibility and ice time throughout the year, which you love to see. This is a player that's smart, he's simple when he needs to be, is really effective at working off his teammates, creating space for his teammates as well, and just plays the game the right way. He is just such a fun player to watch in that aspect, and the way he's able to create off the cycle, off the rush, and continuing to keep possession alive. He's just such a fun player to watch, and I think could be a really interesting middle sixer that just you could put in any type of role and probably get pretty good results out of him. Next up, let's go on to number 15 and go on to one of my favorites here in the draft class, in Tej Aginla, who just continues to rocket up my board every single time I watch him. Is also one of the younger players in this draft class as well, and of course, being the son of Jerome Aginla, he really isn't in the shadow of his father. He is his own player, and he is here to stay. The intensity, the work ethic that he has, the forechecking ability, but the speed and the skill and the vision to create passing lanes and to really create a space for himself and his teammates. This is going to be a really interesting offensive forward in the future, and a guy that you're just going to love having on your team. The intensity and everything is going to make the life for the other team just absolutely chaotic in the best way. Let's keep going through some of my favorites here, though. At number 14, I am Michael Brandsegg-Nygard out of Norway, playing in Sweden this year. He just continues to be one of my favorite players in this draft class. He's probably one of the more simple ones out there, but he's been doing a lot better than the Allsvenskan as of late. 13 points in 29 games. I thought looked good for Norway at the World Juniors, and especially on the power play, was lethal with his shot. But I think this is a player that will bring great intensity. His forechecking game is incredible. I think he's one of the most mature physical forces in this draft, probably top 5, top 3 in that category. And this is a guy that is going to be an NHL player. He's going to bring you big games. And I think alongside maybe a solid playmaking centerman could really get a lot more out of that goal scoring too. Projects probably a 50, maybe 55 point middle six forechecking stud. But now let's go on to number 13, and probably the hottest take for a lot of you guys in this video. Next up, I got Finnish player Conant Helenus, who comes in at number 13, and that doesn't mean he's bad. I still think he's going to be one of the better prospects in this draft, but I will say, he is a player that outside of the hockey IQ gives me a little bit of questions. His foot speed is not that great. His acceleration isn't as quick as you'd want it for a smaller player. Physically, he's okay, but I think just gets by. And there's not really a lot of top-end offensive skills that I think will carry him into a top 6 spot in the NHL. But his IQ is incredible, his transition ability is solid, and the playmaking game has been getting better and better throughout the year. I see him as just this great third-line center of the future that could play second-line center responsibilities if he needs to. Next up, going on to number 12, another big riser in Ontario in Liam Greentree. Playing for the Windsor Spitfires, he has been incredible to watch over the past couple of months on a horrible Windsor team. The maturity in his size and his work ethic and his forechecking, the positioning that he has is incredible. He's a guy that always knows where to be, always knows where to make the right play, keeps the game simple, but again, in the best way. Is a solid passer, has pretty good goal scoring abilities as well, a knack for in front of the net. And it's just a guy that I see being just a great complementary top six winger who could do all the right things and result in a lot more goals for his team. Next up, let's go right outside the top 10 to Trevor Connelly, who just the other night had a big scare injury, but thankfully will only be out for a couple of days, which was a saving grace. He has been pretty great for Tri-City this year in the USHL. If we're talking about pure skill set, I think Trevor Connelly might be top 5, top 8 in this draft class. He has so much soft skill, is just so good with the puck, such a great controller of entries, and is a guy that offensively on the power play with his shot and dual threat combo, he is going to be a great playmaker, a great visionary offensively. I think as a power play, top 6 guy, you're going to get a lot of points from Trevor Connelly in the future. But now we enter the top 10 best prospects in this 2024 draft, and we started out with Zan Perek of the Saginaw Spirit, who I'm a little bit lower on compared to some, but I still see the potential here. He is going to be a rock star offensively and is going to bring a lot of confidence, a lot of really good passing ability to a power play, to 5-on-5, a great transitional guy, and that, of course, goal scoring has been a main highlight over the past couple of years. 22 goals this year, 21 goals last year. He's going to be insane in that department. Defensively, I think there are some issues right now that are a little bit overblown, but he has a very tall stature to him with his positioning, and I think that kind of leads to some players being able to get by him not really being able to reach into the corners and get pucks back and use that positioning in a great way. I think this is a player that will have great offensive capabilities, but is probably one of the bigger boomer bust prospects of this draft. Reminds me a lot of a potentially Brant Clark type. Next up, let's go on to number 9, and here is going to be another controversial one as well. At number 9, I have Cole Eiserman out of the NTDP. I swear, dude, if anybody else ever calls me a biased American again, I'm gonna freeze. With Eiserman, we know the goal-scoring capabilities, and physically, I think there are some pretty good parts as well. He's not afraid to get physical and get into corners, which is a good thing, but defensively, this guy is lackluster. I think 5-on-5, he is going to be pretty much a rover, not a guy that's going to be driving play whatsoever, and will need a great centerman, a great playmaker to bounce off. To me, every time I watch him, I see more of a Patrick Laine, a Mike Hoffman than an Austin Matthews, and I think he will be limited in the other aspects of the game once he reaches the NHL level. Next up, let's move on to number 8 and starting to get into that cream of the crop defensively. Next up, let's go on Anton Slepyshev out of the KHL, who has a 17-year-old 6'7" D, has gotten a lot of responsibility in the KHL this season for a pretty good reason. He continues to show why his mobility, his skating speed, and really the solid physical play has been such a value in the KHL this season. But even though I think there will be some limitations offensively at the next level, the physical traits, the skating traits for a guy this big are really tantalizing, and I think you could still build a top 4D and a pretty good defensive one out of Slepyshev. Now we advance on to number 7 and go on to what was once my number 1 defenseman in this class, and even though he has slipped quite a bit, it is still a pretty close range here in Sam Dickinson from the London Knights. 6'3", 194 pounds. Dickinson is going to be fascinating to look back on. He's one of the younger guys in this draft class, and I think potentially could still be the best defenseman in this draft all around. But I think there are times where you want to see still more out of him. Potentially, I think he could be a great defenseman, but I think he has kind of trailed off against speedier players. He kind of lets them go by a little bit more, and I think he kind of relies on his stick to play defense rather than his physical body, which can work out sometimes, but he's not quite using every single advantage that he's got. But I think under a great coach in the NHL, you could see Dickinson's whole game thrive and really see a great minute eater guy out of Dickinson. Reminds me a lot of Alex Pietrangelo and what he could become. Next up, we go on to maybe the most contentious prospect for me in this draft. At number 6, I got Aram Levanov, the Belarusian stud in the NCAA this year. And it's really hard to talk about Levshunov because it is all tools right now. In the NCAA, he's gotten basically free roaming ability to do whatever he wants offensively, and there are times where he makes some boneheaded plays on defense. just lets guys walk right past him, goes for the wrong attacker. You could tell he was playing in the U18 Belarusian League just 2 years ago. But again, we talk about potential a lot on this show. And to me, with Levshunov, I think he absolutely has the potential to be the best defenseman in this draft. The physical tools are there, his skating pedigree, his edge work, the way he's able to get around the forecheckers when he wants to and when he's making the right play. This is a guy that could be an absolutely stellar skating and transitional defenseman who does all that you want to. Think kind of a buffed up Dmitry Orlov if it's able to work out. But now going on to the best defenseman in the class in the mid-season rankings, I gotta go with American Zeb Bua, who to me is the best American in this draft, the best defenseman in this draft. If you want a player comparable, I would go Lane Hudson, but way more balanced. This is a transitional beast. Offensively can do so many things. His creativity, his confidence, the way he's able to skate around forecheckers, parade the blue line in an efficient way, get pucks in the net, work off forwards in the offensive zone. This is a guy that just has so much going for him on offense. And defensively is maybe the most underrated defenseman in this class on D. He's a guy that really loves to use his skating, use his stick creatively and efficiently. And even though I think there's a lot of more muscle to be bulked up there, this is a guy that's smart defensively and smart in really every single area of the game. And like an Adam Fox, that will bring him a long way. But now we go to the top four, which all features forwards here. And let's go on next up to Berkly Catton, who has been as high as number 2 for me and now comes in at number 4. With Berkly Catton, though, he has been a really interesting player to watch this year. The top end skill is incredible, and he's a guy that just thinks the game offensively just so efficiently, so incredibly well, and uses teammates, uses that vision and that offensive pace in a great way. The only thing is I don't think he's the most impactful skater. He's someone that is very smooth, very calm and fluid with his skating, but is not somebody that's going to have incredible acceleration. And there are times defensively where I do want to see more consistency out of him, but I do think he has the brain, and I think he has the pace in which he plays the game to be a lot better of a defensive player. But I think there will be things, especially as he adds more muscle, that will have to get better if he's going to be the superstar first line guy that I think he could be. Next up at number 3, let's go on to the most creative player in this entire draft class in Ivon Demidov. If you're talking about pure potential, I think there's a case to be made where Demidov becomes a better point getter in the NHL than Macklin Celebrini. This is a guy that is creative, is just so much of a wizard with his puck. I mean, when he has the puck on his stick, it is legendary to see what he's able to pull off, how he's able to just use his deception, just put defenders in a crawl and put them in a retirement home. I mean, the guy is absolutely insane. I think this is a player, though, that will need to maybe improve in some of the physical traits, will need to be a little bit more impactful shift to shift. But man, the talent is there to be one of the best players in this draft, and I think he will be able to become that. Next up at number 2, let's go on to one of my favorites, if not my favorite player in this entire draft class, honestly, and that is Catton Lindstrom out of the WHL, a player that has risen so much over the past little bit, but for very good reason. At 6'4", 216 pounds, he's just so naturally gifted. It's honestly making everybody jealous, as it should. I mean, the guy is just insane. 46 points in 32 games with Medicine Hat this year. Those totals aren't going to knock your rockers off or anything, but the talent and the potential in Lindstrom is incredible. The physical traits he has, the skill set, the skating level for a 6'4" forward it shouldn't be possible, honestly. He is so good, so agile, and so quick. He's able to work off defenders, really use deception well too, and this is a guy that I could see becoming a first-line center in the future, and really a great one too. But then going on to number 1, it is no surprise to see Macklin Celebrini coming at this spot. He is so naturally solid in every single category of the game. He doesn't back down physically, but has such a great skill set, an unbelievable shot that he just unleashes all the time. A great transitional ability, his skating is top end, but those smarts, man, that's what really makes Macklin Celebrini. The compete level, the smarts, and the way he's able to position himself on every single shift. He's always thinking forward, always thinking better, and always pushing more and more. And he is going to be an absolute beast as a center for any NHL team. But those are my 2024 NHL draft rankings. Let me know in the comments down below, what did you guys agree with? What did you guys disagree with? And what did you guys think my rankings this time around? Did I do good? Did I not do good? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Of course, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell for more draft content just like this, because you guys won't want to miss a thing. And of course, share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online, especially to the fans of teams that aren't so good, because they might need this video a lot more than you do. And of course, click this card for more hockey prospect content and 2024 content to binge right in one playlist. My name is Nathan, and I hope you have a fantastic hockey day, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.